This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Daniel O'Brien, K-State grain economist, kicks off today's show, discussing the trends and futures in cash and his expectations for the USDA reports that are coming out on January 12th. Keeping the show rolling is K-State Extension swine specialist Joel DeRouchey, previewing the upcoming Swine Profitability Conference and who attendees will be able to learn from. K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond wraps up the show, explaining if Kansas residents can be expecting a snowstorm this winter or continued above average temperatures. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show with a grain market update from K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. Daniel, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Shelby.
Daniel, today also wanting to talk about some expectations that we'll see from the USDA reports that we'll get on Monday. However, first, what are we seeing for cash and futures?
Well, actually, some gained the high side in the corn and soybean futures over the last several days. From about a week ago, we've traded up from about $4.35 for the March contract up to a close of about $4.46. So again, about a dime higher. And we're really, for these corn futures, we're kind of trading within a range. The relative strength index for corn contract is, again, slightly positive. So not much going on. I think, again, we're waiting now for what Monday's report will give us, see what changes might come about. When we look at soybeans, again, we had fallen off as low as about $10.40 within the last week or so, week and a half, trading now at $10.61 and a quarter. We had a fair amount of upside from the low that we'd had. Still, you stand back and look at the chart, we'd fallen way off from where we were about 2 months ago when we were up to about 1175, 1180. So we're lower, waiting for more information. And then for wheat, we had seen a low in the last couple, 2 or 3 weeks of about 510, 505, something like that. And then in a kind of a tortured up and down path, closed yesterday about at $5.30 and a quarter cents for the March 26 contract. So not a lot going on. Very, very similar patterns really for all these contracts. It is interesting when you look at cash bids. For the most part, not a lot going on. Again, with basis not changing very much. However, you do see some unique bids that are standing out in some of these areas. For instance, in the Pittsburgh area, for corn, you have a bid of $4.26, and for grain sorghum, a bid of $4.30, but that's one or two lead elevators in that area. The rest are a bit lower. So it does make you wonder about people having contracts to fill, et cetera, specific needs. We did see, again, the highest cash price, again, for corn in the state, actually that Pittsburgh bid, about $4.26. They have a bid of about $4.20, $4.25, something like that in the Garden City area, so not that far behind. For grain sorghum, top bid, again, is that $4.30 bid in the Pittsburgh area. For soybeans, one bid at 10.01, and that would be in Topeka, Kansas. Again, that tending to be a larger commercial concern. Probably very, very likely you'd suspect someone they're buying either to fill a crush contract or something for rail for shipment. Other bids, top one, $9.96 in the Pittsburgh area. So not incidental that we have crush plants not far from both of those locations. So it's probably part of the overall issue. And for wheat, top bid in the area, $4.96, both the Salina and Topeka area, and about a nickel lower at $4.91 in Hutchinson. So again, it looks more like it's an export-oriented set of numbers. I would say that for new crop bids, it's interesting. Right now, we're kind of in the mode of, as we're past the first of the year, we'll be giving attention towards acreage estimates for corn, for soybeans, for sorghum. Well, and come Monday, we'll find out what the hard red winter wheat projections are for acreage for 2026. But the price ratios, again, for new crop bids, if you have new crop ratio of soybeans to corn futures that's over 2.3, then it's generally favoring beans. If not, if it's at 2.3, it's kind of neutral. It's below that's favoring corn. So 2.55 ratio at Topeka, Hutchinson, 2.5 again, and that's on those top bids. 2.4 in Salina. In those areas, we're favoring soybeans, but you have other areas which are neutral. Pittsburgh being one, especially out West Garden City and Colby, where we're definitely favoring corn. So I don't know when we talk about broader trends in terms of where acreage would go this year, that I guess there's variation around the country, and it's not necessarily one uniform flat surface in terms of where we're favoring one crop or the other. It's probably more of a varying situation around the country.
And Daniel, for those USDA reports that we're going to see on January 12th, what are you excited or going to look at first when you see them?
Well, I'll look at corn yields and soybean yields. I think we're at the mode, and we're in a situation where we want to answer the question, put it to bed, be done with it, to find out what the final national yields were for those crops. And when you look at projected U.S. corn yield, I guess the expectations going into this report, the USDA said in November, last time they had a NASH report set of numbers out, that we had 186 bushels per acre. The market's coming into Monday expecting 184. So that makes a difference of about 400 million bushels between. Pardon me. The lowest trade estimate's 182. The highest trade estimate's 108. Would be 186. That'd be equal with the USDA. But you start looking at the difference of 186 bushels per acre and 16.75 billion bushels of corn, and if we get 184 bushels, it's 16.5. Well, 200 million bushels. You take that straight into the USDA and supply demand balance sheet, and suddenly you're below the USDA's projection of what they'd had in December for ending stocks for corn of 2.029 billion bushels. Well, if we take 200 million bushels right off the top, then you're down to 1.8. And you start to get to tighten up ending stocks and start to see prices change. For soybeans, USDA had projected again in November, 53 bushels an acre. The market's pretty comfortable with that, 52.7. And I guess I'm falling prey to the same thing we've fallen prey to about the last 2 or 3 years, just to see dry conditions in the U.S. Corn Belt at the end of the growing season. I'm thinking, gracious, you'd think that had some impact on U.S. yield when we finished up the previous year, but the market right now is not really expecting that. I think they've also seen the error of their ways the last 2 years, and we'll see where they go. But the lowest yield that is projected for beans, just under 52 bushels an acre, so that's about 0.8 of a bushel. And unless a change happens like that, you're probably not going to see big changes in supply demand balance sheets or the ending stocks. So when you asked your question, you said, well, where do you think the change could come, if there would be any, in the supply demand balance sheets that we're seeing, the WASDE report numbers and all of that? I would wonder about the soybean yield. Again, we're pretty comfortable with where that thing is at, and where those numbers are, what the USDA expects, but yet it wouldn't take that much of a national change to be below the bottom end of that yield range and to start to affect the balance sheet some. So that's what I wonder about. Other crops, still be wondering how the U.S. grain sorghum crop ends up, and if the USDA will change the supply demand balance sheet numbers in terms of export usage for sorghum. We've been having a pickup in an increase in some export pace for sorghum of late, but we've delayed so long to get started. I wonder if we'll meet the 225 million bushels, or we'll see something more conservative by 25, 50 million bushels. Also, we'll have a grain stocks report, which will be really important for corn, for sorghum, for wheat, for beans, especially the feed grains. In terms of feeding, we'll find out on Monday more information on actual livestock feed use of these crops, and see where that takes us for ending stocks estimates. And for wheat, right now, the market seems to be of the mind that if we had all winter wheat planting in 2025 at 33.15 million acres, they're down about 750,000 from that. And most of that change, well, half of it or more, 450,000 or so, also would be coming from lower hard red winter wheat. And, as we're sitting here in Kansas, we don't see, at least yet, a lot of damage, I don't think, in hard red winter wheat conditions, although it's been pretty dry, but probably lower winter wheat acreage projected for hard red, and some degree also for soft red winter in the Central Eastern Corn Belt, and for white winter too. So interesting to watch all those moving parts.
With the reports coming out on Monday, and as we're chatting today on January 8th, this Thursday, are all the reports going to be caught up?
Yes, we finally, as of this week, are caught up in terms of what had been a delayed set of information for the export numbers. And I would say, following right along with that, and kind of cycling back to that yield figure, finally, USDA NASS is also caught up in terms of processing all this information that they had coming into the latter part of last year. So I guess that's why market watchers and the price makers for the USDA will be focusing so much on the NASS numbers, just with the idea of just acknowledgement, I guess, of how challenging a situation they had last year with missing those 2 key months and being delayed and be able to get out into the field. As just adds an unusual element of uncertainty this year that could give us a surprise to markets. I think we'll go into those reports, and the general expectation for the folks watching from a distance is that not much will happen. But there is that underlying hand grenade there of how yields could actually finally turn out, and if they go lower and affect the balance sheets, then that changes perspective on the markets for the next 2 or 3 months.
Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Shelby. I appreciate it.
That was K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the 36th Annual K-State Swine Profitability Conference with K-State Extension Swine Specialist Joel DeRouchey. Joel, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on to discuss the conference.
Joel, what is the K-State Swine Profitability Conference?
Yeah, we host 2 larger public conferences here at K-State. One is our K-State Swine Day in November, and at that one we talk about new research over the last year. The Swine Profitability Conference that we're hosting February 3rd is focused on more of the business side. So we have speakers and information that are going to bring new knowledge on opportunities on the markets, herd health, as well as optimizing labor and talking about their experiences on their own operations. So really what we have is a lot of take-home message for our swine owners, production staff, really any of the employees, but specifically a lot of economic and management decisions for our business owners.
And this conference is taking place Tuesday, February 3rd, and starts off with 9:15 coffee and donuts, and then a presentation starting at 9:45. And who do attendees get to hear from?
Yeah, we're kicking off with at 9:45 with Brian Ernest. He's the lead economist of the animal protein division at CoBank, and he is really a national leader in looking at U.S. and his title is U.S. Pork Market and Opportunities to Grow Market Share. He has a vast knowledge of the pork industry in that animal protein space for CoBank, and is really going to bring a lot of updated information looking at 2026, not only in the U.S., but brings an international perspective as well to tie all that together. We then go after him with Dr. Cesar Corzo. He's at the University of Minnesota. What he has been doing is a lot of information gathering and research looking at trailer contamination, so transport contamination, particularly coming back from harvest plants. One of the things from a health perspective that we know is that transportation is one of the largest mechanisms where we pass potential pathogens from site to site. They have done some really innovative work looking at how trailers become reinfected or become infected with pathogens leaving harvest plants, and then the cleaning and all the things that need to go into that. And so we have many examples in Kansas where that's happened to our Kansas producers. We wanted to bring him in to bring some really new knowledge of what they have discovered in their program and how that impacts our producers. We also then in the morning have another speaker, Fred Kerr. He's the director of production of Dykheist Farms in Hamilton, Michigan. So he's coming down, and the Dykheist family's been very innovative in applying practical on-farm technology to optimize their labor. They no longer run any paper on their farms. It's all with handheld devices. And he really does a nice job of breaking it down of how they implement this to save labor, to improve their record keeping. And he's been the Dykheist family's kind of been a national leader in this area and really show producers that this is achievable. It's not a intimidating process if they're not using any of that today. And Fred just does a tremendous job talking through that. We'll then roll into lunch. And then after lunch, we have two speakers. Each year we focus on featuring a Kansas swine operation to tell their generational story. And we're excited to have Nicole Harrison of Rezac Livestock just by Onega, Kansas. And the Rezac family has been involved in the swine industry for a couple generations now. And that's why we want to have them in. And Nicole will do a really nice job of talking about how they've transitioned their swine operation, where she provides primary leadership now, and she's got a young family and they're involved, and just to talk about their story. Then we'll conclude at 2:15 with our last speaker, with Dr. Chris Sievers. He's from the Swine Vet Center in St. Peter, Minnesota. And he has done a lot of practical work for in-barn strategies to address wean to finish mortality. We know that mortality of any stage of production hurts our bottom line, but particularly in the finishing stage. And he spends a lot of time in this area and wants to bring information to our Kansas producers and those that would attend about the in-barn strategies to reduce that, so we maximize our profitability by minimizing mortalities in the finishing stage.
Joel, you mentioned the presentation on hog trailer contamination, specifically looking at harvest plants, but do you see that having application for more locations than just the harvest facilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So their data, is focused on that, but it's really the same concept. If we take a transport trailer to a finishing site, and if it becomes contaminated with pathogens, we can bring that back to the nursery, or if we have the same from the nursery to the sow farm. So it's really just one stage of that mechanism of going to harvest plants, but it certainly applies as we look at taking that transportation to any stage back to a different production location.
Joel, on the technology optimization where there's no paperwork around the farm, how are they really keeping track and following pigs around the facilities?
All the animals, the sows, and really it's many operations already have EID tags, or a tag that's scannable depending on if they have a feeding system that utilizes that to drop or to feed that sow individually. So many operations already have the tags on those sows in place. And then it's just really implementing a technology for the other record keeping. We're already doing that on the feed side for many farms. It's really taking it to the next step of their production in terms of at farrowing time, any piglet mortalities, any treatment. So if the sow is sick, when she was treated, what she was treated with, withdrawal time. So all of that gets incorporated in, so we can pull up individual information on sows and litters and have all that already back in our database when we're making production decisions on an individual basis.
What types and sizes of operations do you recommend attend this event?
Yeah, it really, the information here spans all sizes. So certainly our larger Kansas producers are frequent attenders and get information. But also, even some of our operations that just maybe have a few sows or a few pigs are feeding out. I think it's all back into perspective as you take information and bring it back to fit your operation. So many of these stories, many of the information presenting is going to be applicable to any operation size. And so we want to make sure that that is understood. And I appreciate that question, that regardless of your production system, there'll be pieces of information really through all these talks that you can bring back and utilize in your operation to make you more profitable.
Is this also an opportunity for, if people want to interact with K-State Extension swine specialist, they have the opportunity?
Yeah, so our entire staff, faculty, our graduate students will be there. The other opportunity there too is we have a lot of sponsorship through our allied industry partners. So again, we have a lot of our industry that supports us, the swine producers attending. They help with sponsorship, which keeps our registration costs very minimal for all of our attendees to come. And so whether it's equipment, health, nutrition, genetics, many of them will have representatives at this event to visit with. And again, many of them are ones that already work with our Kansas producers. So it's a good time to see them in person and to continue those relationships as well.
And speaking of registration, what is cost for this year?
Yeah, so our cost to attend is $25 a person, and that's really made possible through our sponsors that help defray costs, our allied industry, but also the Kansas Pork Association. They're our lead sponsor, and we really appreciate them helping to help offset the costs of the conference. So in terms of the registration process, the registration information can be found at our website at ksuswine.org. Again, that's ksuswine.org. In our events, the Swine Profitability Conference is highlighted. After you select that, the program and registration come right up. And basically, we're asking for registrations. Early registration for the $25 is by January 23rd. After that, the price increases to $50, and you can register after that or at the door. We always have a number of people, because of their schedules, they're unsure up to that point, and have many people register that day, and that's more than fine, but it's $50 after January 23rd.
Where is this taking place?
This takes place at the Stanley Stout Center, which is the same location we've held it for several years now, the Stanley Stout facility. The address is listed on the website. If you haven't been at that facility prior, it sits just on our north side of our campus buildings, still adjacent really to campus in our North Campus area.
Joel, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on to visit about the Swine Profitability Conference.
That was K-State Extension Swine Specialist Joel DeRouchey. The 36th K-State Swine Profitability Conference is taking place Tuesday, February 3rd. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Friday show with a weather update from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chip, as we take a look back at the weather we've been having, isn't it still quite a bit above average when we look at temperatures?
Very much above average. We've set records in a lot of western and central Kansas over the last week or two. Just some of the warmest days exceeding 70s. We even had a couple 80s. And we look at just December as a whole for especially western Kansas along the Colorado border, record warmest December on record. And that's pretty impressive. It probably was even more impressive is it's actually been warmer further west. And almost all of the states west of the Central Plains observe their warmest December on record, with some places being 10 to 15 degrees above normal. So warmth has been the story thus far this winter, and we've really struggled to build cold air. All the cold air has been off to our north. Basically, look at Alaska, Northwest Canada, they've been extremely cold, negative 40s, negative 50s. In fact, I was just looking at the average for one of the main Alaskan cities, and the average temperature for the last 30 days was negative 25. But all that cold's been steered off to the east and has reached the northeastern United States, but missed us completely.
And when I think of January, I often think of our precipitation being snow. However, on Thursday, we saw a bit of rain.
a bit of rain. Some folks had a lot of rain. When we look at the totals, we had over an inch of rain in portions of southeast Kansas. There was another band of rain that got about a half inch there from roughly Lane County north and east towards Osborne County. And that's some impressive rainfall for this time of the year. When we look at average precipitation for really the month of January, it's the lowest, right? This is our driest month of the year, and we don't expect precipitation totals exceeding an inch really anywhere outside of far southeast, where some folks average inch and a half or so, even 2 inches down there in far Cherokee County. But so most of the state saw their average precipitation just in Thursday's rain event. And then we look at other areas that still need some precipitation to get there, especially the northeast, northwest, and parts of south central. But, it's the driest time of the year. We don't expect big rain events like this. We expect more of the wintry kind.
A year ago, we did have quite a bit of that wintry kind with the blizzard. And while we've seen just a little bit of snow across Kansas this past week, are we going to get a blizzard as winter feels like it's coming to an end?
Yeah, it feels like it's coming to an end, doesn't it? In fact, I was kind of remarking to some people earlier today. It feels like April. It feels like we're almost over the hump and should be tasting summer. That's not the case. The calendar doesn't lie to us. Despite temperatures starting to increase, we got about another week or so of the coldest temperatures, but then after that, they start to increase going into late January, early February, and then we're starting to climb really up towards summer. We have got a big temperature gradient across the United States with that cold air in the north and then the warm air to the south. We need that contrast to help keep an active weather pattern. So we've got that there. We just need to be able to get the moisture timed with the cold. And getting the cold this far south is going to be the tricky part. We failed so far this year as that cold tends to just skirt off to our north and east. And with no snowpack across the western United States, we're going to really struggle to bring any cold air from the west. And so when we look at the potential for a big storm, we could have big blizzards all the way through April. We can't obviously say that there's no chance at all. I would just say right now, without a big substantial pattern change, it's going to be a challenge to get any big winter storm into the central plains. Most storms are going to have more warm air to work with. We're going to see more rainfall than anything. If we do get storms, and honestly, through the rest of January, things are looking pretty dry. It might have another potential maybe late next week into that final week of January with some additional moisture chances. But overall, I think we're going to be average to below average probably for the next couple of weeks, and definitely very low probability for any significant high impact winter weather.
Chip, I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yep, thanks for having me.
That was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. That's all we have for you this week on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Monday.